The oak is sacred in pagan circles, and it is these leaves that Shelley's writer claims to have discovered, and upon those dismal prophecies the last man is founded. The Sibyl's Cave is a major tourist attraction even today, but recent excavations there indicate that it's actually a Christian burial tomb. The Last Man takes place in the late 21st century, and while its plot has been hailed as an allegory for the ultimate tragedy of each individual life, it contains elements useful to our discussion today. The novel introduces the reader to unsavory characters and other unlikable people in search of meaning. The novel begins with the words in bold type, "I am," and ends in the final chapter with equally bold type in capital letters, "The Last Man." It's been said that I Am Legend, the 1954 novel by Richard Matheson, was loosely inspired by Shelley's book. Both center around a plague that kills nearly all of humanity until only the hero, or anti-hero in this case, is left standing as the final true human. And so we return to our central theme: can science, and by extrapolation man himself, improve upon the design that God intended upon the original first man, Adam, to yield what Nietzsche calls the Übermensch, the Superman? Does human 2.0, or H+, wait in the wings of history? Is this the ultimate end prophesied by the Sibyls? In the beginning, the true and only I Am, the King of the universe and Creator without beginning and end, spoke his own prophecies in the Garden of Eden, where he had placed his creation, Adam. God Almighty, seeing the fallen state of his once perfect man and woman, comforted Eve by proclaiming that a Redeemer would arise, the true last man, the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, and that this seed of woman would triumph over the seed of the serpent. If, as I've stated, the original man bore the original DNA, then did Adam's DNA degrade after the fall? Was early man's DNA different from our own? Did God, or did the enemy, alter this nuclear book? And where are we now headed? When I studied genetics at Indiana University, we often talked about the ethics of molecular tinkering. And one class instructor ended a session by handing out a small slip of paper with one question on it. Is it ethical to build a super soldier clone in order to defend our nation? And if so, would that clone be human? I took this course back in the fall of 1992, and the memory of the first attack on the World Trade Towers was still fresh in all of our minds. The first Gulf War raged in Iraq and Kuwait, and I personally knew many students whose families fought on both sides, some Kuwaiti, some Arab. The terrible atrocities taking place in the Balkans also filled nightly newscasts. A recent article in Discovery uses the Frankenstein analogy I mentioned earlier to explain a new synthetic creation, published on May 20th of this year and written by Eric Bland, and the first few paragraphs are as follows. It may not quite be Frankenstein, but for the first time, scientists have created an organism controlled completely by human-made DNA. Man's dirt? Using the tools of synthetic biology, scientists from the J. Craig Venter Institute installed a completely artificial genome inside a host cell without DNA. Like the bolt of lightning that awakened Frankenstein, the new genome invigorated the host cell, which began to grow and reproduce, albeit with a few problems. The research marked a technical milestone in the synthesis and implantation of artificial DNA. Venter expects the research will lead to cheaper drugs, vaccines, and biofuels in several years, and dozens of other companies and researchers are working toward the same goal. You might ask, why is this man laughing? Well, he is Dr. Craig Venter, and he is hailed as one of the esteemed scientists behind the Human Genome Project. In fact, he's standing in front of a human genome right there. However, instead of using dead body parts, Venter is essentially building his own dirt, synthetic DNA, mentioned earlier, such as LNA and PNA. And according to his own website, Venter and his fellow scientists say that the synthetic genomics, With synthetic genomics, it is possible to design and assemble chromosomes, genes, and gene pathways, and even whole genomes. That means entire creatures. In an October 2007 report for the Venter Institute entitled Synthetic Genomics Options for Governance, and I think Tom Horn goes, yes, I know that one. The researchers at the Institute proudly proclaim that entire genomes can one day be constructed synthetically. Imagine a virus whose entire genome were the invention of a man or men of science. What might this virus do inside a host cell, and what purpose would it serve? Viruses now are currently used as vectors, like small microscopic trucks that carry genetic information to a defective cell in order to repair the cell's genetic instructions. In other words, rewrite the book, or at least a page or two. Science fiction? No, it's science fact. The report admits that synthetic DNA constructs have existed for at least 35 years, and you can bet that if it's in the literature says 35 years, it's at least 20 years beyond that. But that until recently such constructs were limited in size and that they took years to build. However, we have entered a new age in synthetic dirt. The United States now has 24 companies dedicated to producing synthetic strands of at least 50,000 base pairs or larger in only 6 to 8 weeks. They can, in fact, deliver custom made-to-order sequences. The customer simply inputs the base pairing desired, and these companies churn it out like a little chromosome factory. And as I said, the USA has at least 24 of these companies. New ones start up all the time, for the process has become routine. You need only buy the equipment and hire a technician. However, the other countries appear to be lagging, if they're being honest in their numbers. The UK only claims to have one such company, Russia 2, and China only says it has 2. Of course, these numbers might be disputed since Russia and China often underreport, or perhaps these countries don't know that you can buy such synthesizers online at public auction sites. And if you think it's frightening to imagine suitcase nukes in U.S. cities, imagine a terror cell with access to a gene synthesizer.